So welcome, Mike Williams. This is part 3. I already let everyone know that they have to go back and listen to part 1 and 2 because this is definitely something they have to hear from the start. You've done a lot of groundwork to get to where we are. So I just encourage everyone listening, please go back to part 1 and 2. It's so important because you probably are going to be a little lost if you just join in here, but that's up to you guys. I just recommend it, and I think Mike would too. And I'm glad we got everything sorted out. We're working. Just letting everyone listening know that you've been doing this for 8 years. You've done a massive amount of research and done videos and interviews, and that this is kind of like your final. You're done with the Beatles after probably this interview or soon after. And so I wanted to let you just talk a bit about that and why you think it's come to an end.
It gets to the point where you reach diminishing returns. You can continue to put work into it, but the big bang for the buck is really not there anymore. And my work, probably what I'll be known for at the end of the day, is going to be the work that I did on whether the Beatles wrote all their own music and played on all of their recorded tracks, which is highly controversial.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't want to hear that because they love the Cinderella story. But I stand behind my research 100%. And so, at the end of the day, when people look back and say, well, what was his Beatles work? What was it really all about? What was the big topic that he covered? It would be the music. And then also, and we'll get into this in this presentation here.
Okay.
I'm connected into about half a dozen colleagues, really smart people, great researchers. And one of them is Sally Whitty. And Sally, going back, I guess about a year and a half ago, I get fuzzy on dates sometimes. It just becomes a big blur.
I get it.
She discovered that Billy has an artificial eye. He has an ocular prosthetic. He is blind in his right eye. So when we get into the replacement of Paul McCartney and some of the differentiators, how do we know that Billy is not Paul? Well, I'll take you through that. And another piece of work that was done by another researcher that I'm connected into, Stacy. She did a fabulous job of taking the clues that are embedded in the memoirs of Billy Shears. Now, for those who are not familiar with the book, I've talked about this on the previous shows with Rick. It's a book that came out in 2009. The author or the encoder is Thomas Hugh Harriott, and the book is encoded. What that means is it's layered with clues. And it's like a big puzzle. And if you're intrepid enough and you dig in, you'll start to piece that puzzle together. And Stacy did a fabulous job because one of the questions that comes up is, well, if Billy Shears is not Paul McCartney, then who's his family? What's his lineage, his ancestry, and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a logical question to ask. So I'll take the audience through that. I have one slide that summarizes where Stacy landed. Now, I have no idea whether Stacy is 100% correct, but I will say that the case that she put forward, based upon connecting the dots and the evidence, is very compelling. So I'll take the audience through that as well. So
that's perfect.
Yeah, so in any case, so it's the music, it's Billy's eye, it's his family ancestry. He's in that blue blood line of the elite establishment. And as I said, once you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, well, what else is there to talk about? And I decided that I talked about everything that I feel needed to be discussed and presented. So that's the point I'm at now. Now, that doesn't mean in the future, if something big pops, like Billy passes away or whatever, or some other significant event takes place, that I won't hop back in and say a word or two about it. But as far as the ongoing research, Rick, day in, day out stuff and all that, that's going to stop. And it's going to conclude, I picked a date, November 9th of this year. After November 9th, there might be a few videos here or there or whatever. But like I said, the ongoing grind of doing the research is done.
Oh, that makes total sense. I was saying that right before I added you to the call. I get where you're at because there's one case in particular just a a cold case that I've been looking into for like 7 years, and it's just it's called The Gray State, and it's David Crowley case. It's one of the first shows I ever did here, and it's just a murder investigation that was done really bad, and it just there's all these questions. And after like 7 years, I get where you're at. Like you kind of get to the point. I'm at the point with that case. Like I'm just like I can't cover anything else. I'm just going to be repeating myself over
Right.
and over and over and over again. So I get that, and I'm like you. I said if there's anything that pops off new, of course I'm going to cover it. Then we can get back into it. But I just can't. It's just something I'll bring up the odd time just to keep it in my listeners' minds, because it is a case that I think everyone should look into. It's really, when you dig into it, it's crazy. And so it's one of those cases that I've just taken an interest in for a lot of reasons. But I get it. I get it where it is. And I love your research, especially about the Beatles. Did they write their own music? I've got into discussions since I started talking to you about this. And boy, Mike, do some people get upset. I've had people yell at me. That's how intense the discussion got when I just brought up anything negative with the Beatles. It wasn't. And then when you bring up that they might have wrote all their own songs, oh, then you're on a ride.
Yeah, that's because people have not looked into the research, Rick. What they have embraced is the official narrative, which is a story. It's myth. In fact, going back into I think it was 1971, soon after the Beatles broke up, John Lennon did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine. And in that interview, he said the Beatles are a myth, Paul McCartney is a myth, Bob Dylan is a myth. The thing is, people are emotionally attached to their celebrities, their entertainers, their bands, and there is this emotional attachment. There's a romanticism about that connection. You have to excuse me, folks. I'm a little under the weather here.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I forgot to let people know Mike is not feeling the greatest, but he did decide to still be here. So thank you.
So that's what happens, and we've covered this in the other shows. I won't talk about this for very long, but
Okay.
the silver bullet is Rubber Soul. When I present Rubber Soul, there's two pieces to it. One is that they wrote 16 songs in 30 days, right? So they had to write the songs from scratch. They had to learn the songs, rehearse the songs, arrange the songs, record them, mix them, and get it all done within a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not reality. And the second thing is that the manufacturing process for the record was not possible as well.
Right.
The only way it could have been possible was that a ton of work was done before the Beatles ever stepped into the studio. And that meant that the songs were already written and the instrumentals were already recorded. And that allowed George Martin to be able to get the printing process started for the record labels, the sleeves to the albums, all of that stuff that comes together, that converges to get an album released.
Right.
So the timing on that, again, if you want to know more about that, you can go back to the previous show I did with Rick, or you can go to my channel and watch one of my videos on that topic. Those two things alone, as far as I'm concerned, it's the nail in the coffin. So Rubber Soul said to me that the Beatles did not write all their own music, and they did not play on the recorded tracks. For Rubber Soul, what they did for those 30 days was to learn the vocals for the 16 songs and record the vocal tracks. And then once they got done with that, George Martin married the instrumental tracks with the vocals, mixed it, and then the album was released. But that's what happens, and I'm very used to it. Trust me.
I can imagine.
It can be, it could be very, very toxic because you're stepping into people's belief systems. It's no different than if somebody is a Christian, just using that as an example, and then, you go off and you say, well, how do you know Jesus even existed, right? You're asking an honest question, but they take tremendous offense to that.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing because it's a religion.
Yeah.
One of the things that Tavistock does really, really well is to create cults.
Absolutely.
And the Beatles are a cult, as well as many other bands. The Rolling Stones are a cult. Led Zeppelin is a cult. The Kinks are a cult because they have followers. They have believers. Mm-hmm. The Doors are a cult. The Beatles are the largest and most prominent cult in the music industry. And that's how they're able to steer people. So once you get people into a cult mentality and they just accept whatever it is that is fed to them, whether it be through the television or the radio, or you've got them. You've literally have them, and it's very difficult to break out of the programming.
Mm-hmm.
Look, again, folks, without belaboring this, I was a huge Beatle fan. I was a Beatle freak. And it wasn't until 2016 when I read the memoirs of Billy Shears, and the book had already been out 7 years. I was 7 years late to the party.
Wow, okay.
And once I read it in 2016, I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I didn't want to believe what I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
But, I said, let me take a look at this and let me see how much of this I can disprove. And, there was a whole lot of it I couldn't disprove. There are threads of fiction in the memoirs of Billy Shears. The book is very open about that, and it's because it's classified as historical fiction, and that's done for purposes of plausible deniability, because
Exactly.
Billy has signed non-disclosure agreements, secrecy agreements, as has Tom Harriet, the author/encoder of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to have plausible deniability. But in any case, it's a tough discussion. But I will say this: there are also a lot of people, they have broken the programming, Rick, and I could see this on my channel, and I could see this through the emails. And this includes, by the way, a lot of musicians and songwriters. I have musicians, songwriters, sound engineers, a couple of producers that subscribe to my channel. They get it. They get it. And at one time, by the way, they believed what everybody else believed, that the Beatles were this great band, geniuses, prolific songwriters, great musicians, and all that stuff. And then, once you take a step back and you're objective, you have to get rid of all of the baggage that you've been carrying, because you have to remember the whole Beatles conspiracy, that narrative has been around for 60 years.
That's true.
So we've had this hammered into our heads for 6 decades. And so it's not an easy thing to break loose from. But once you do, I tell people all the time, it's not a big deal. Once you break from it and you realize what it really was, I think that you're better off, because now you're on the side of truth versus being deceived.
Absolutely.
I don't know. People like to be deceived because a lot of times the deception is a warm, fuzzy thing.
Yeah.
And it makes them happy. That's how else would you deceive somebody? You're not going to make it ugly, because then they're going to walk away or shy away, right? So you're going to make it very compelling. And that's what they do in the entertainment and the music industry. It's completely controlled from cradle to grave.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. As I was just saying, I totally get where you're coming from, and I know that if, like you said, if anything comes up new, you'll be the first to be there to cover it, and dive into it. So I have no doubt about that. And I'm glad that you kind of talked about how it is, orchestrated and how it is controlled, because I'm sure a lot of people listening totally get what you're saying. There might be some, like I said, people with music are a little funny when you start attacking things. Not really attacking, just even discussing. I should not use that word attacking, because I don't do that. I usually get into discussions and then it kind of gets heated if I bring up certain things, especially the Beatles, as I was saying, and not taking any away from anything from what they've done. That's what I try to tell people too. I'm not saying that they, they definitely became probably better musicians as the years went on, and stuff like that. I think they get mad that I say that at the beginning, and it's like, of course they got better and that, but it's not the story that's not the whole story. Like, it's not exactly, it's kind of fabricated, a lot of it. It's a lot of myth and stuff like that to build it up. I get it. It's part of show business. I kind of get all of it. But to think, I think most people would realize, like you said, that, this is all engineered, and most people, I think, I hope, would understand that Hollywood and social media and all of that is highly engineered, and it does steer people, and it steers the world, and easily. And to think that they're not doing that with music, which we know they do, they're doing it now. Yeah. To think they weren't doing it back then is just you have to really stretch not to understand that there's some things going on, especially with Laurel Canyon and that. Like, the more I was saying before you came on, you really, when you start digging a little deeper, you start scratching just below the bands, and you start to look at all the names in it, and it really gets dark. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of cult stuff going on back then, and now it's still here. It's just changed face a little.
Yeah, if you want to learn about Laurel Canyon, read Dave McGowan's book, Weird Scenes. Dave's not alive anymore, but it's a fabulous book, and he explains that all of these acts and these bands and these entertainers and so on that were in the Laurel Canyon scene, that was all being manufactured and orchestrated by the CIA,
Yep.
who is connected at the hip with the Tavistock Institute.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing, Rick, going back to something you said, which was very important, people want to argue, they get upset, well, are you saying that, the Beatles weren't great musicians? No, the Beatles, let me just tell you, okay, no, the Beatles were not great musicians, but you know what? Set that aside, forget about that, because what's happening is, people are not transcending to the main issue. They're stuck with the idol worship, right? That's what it is. It's idol worship. They love
For
Paul
sure.
McCartney, they love John Lennon, they love George Harrison, they love Ringo. So they're at that level. So that's where they want to debate. What they don't understand is, let's just say that the Beatles did write all their own music and the Beatles were fabulous musicians. It was still an agenda. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So you have to rise up above that discussion point where you want to defend your belief system, and you got to get to the point, what was the music really all about? I mean, anytime you watch a documentary on the Beatles, what do they always say? They were cultural revolutionaries. They changed the culture. That's what we need to focus on. So if they're changing culture, if there are culture wars, then what is at stake? What is actually going on? I talked about this in the last show. And that culture war is to implement cultural Marxism. It's to move to a Marxist state, New World Order. And the Beatles played a very, very key part in setting the table and getting lifestyles and values and beliefs and morals and ethics changed in order to prime the pump to move forward. Each genre of music, the British Invasion, you've got
Glam metal.
Glam, you've got punk,
Yep.
you've got all of this stuff, and
Yep.
all of these genres were created. There's nothing organic about any of it.
Yeah.
And what they're doing, it's a very incremental methodology that they use, where they just kind of take each step on the ladder one by one to make that change. Because if they make the change too quickly, then what's going to happen? They run the possibility or the risk that too many people are going to wake up and figure out what's going on. So they just take it step by step, very incrementally, and that's how they put the change forward. But in any case, so I think we want to talk about actually the replacement of Paul McCartney, right?
Right. We built up to that. Yeah, we got into the Crowley. We've covered so much, and I once again I just want to thank you, Mike, because this is, like I said, you got to go back, guys, and hear the last 4 hours. Like, this is something that we've built up right from the beginning, and we've got into so much. And now we left off on Crowley and the occult, and I know you're going to be talking more about that. I'm going to just let you continue, because you're the one that can tell this perfect. I'm learning a lot of this as we go. I know some of it, but not as in depth as I have learned from listening to you. So wherever you want to take off from this, Mike, I'm here.
Okay, so a question that a lot of people will have is, well, how do you know Paul McCartney was replaced? And so let me just go back and just tell the prevailing conspiracy, which has been around a long time. It really got legs starting around 1969, but it was also being bantered around before that. The prevailing theory says that Paul McCartney died in a car crash in late 1966. And the way I want to call it the mainstream conspiracy telling of the story, which is kind of weird, right? That's an oxymoron, is that the Beatles management needed to replace Paul because they were concerned that many fans were going to be extremely upset. There might be suicides and stuff like that if they found out about the loss of Paul. That's some of the stuff you'll hear. For the longest time, researchers have taken a look at, and there's been obviously researchers before me that were looking at this, and they've done some very good work. And it consisted of doing comparison photos of Paul McCartney and then the guy that's playing the part of Paul McCartney, who I call Billy Shears. And by the way, the reason is because he introduces himself to us on the Sgt. Pepper album, right? So after track one, after the Sgt. Pepper, the title track, he says, "Let me introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears." And then it goes into the song "With a Little Help from My Friends." So he's introducing himself to us. Now, there's a couple of things. Billy is taller than Paul. I would say between 2 to 3 inches or so. Here's the other thing. There were a number of doubles and lookalikes that were in play from day one. So when the Beatles first hit the scene, let's just say, we'll say 1963, when they really started to get fired up over across the pond in England. And they got here in the States in February of '64. For every biological Beetle, I was told by a source that there were 3 lookalikes and or doubles. So that means that there was biological Paul and 3 lookalikes or doubles. The same thing for John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. So what does that mean? Well, it means that many times when you're looking at these images, going back in time, you may not be looking at biological Paul. So, and some of these doubles and lookalikes, they had different heights. They were in the ballpark, but they might be 2 inches taller, an inch shorter, so it made it very difficult. The other thing that I found over the 8 years that I've been doing the research is that many, many images have been doctored. In fact, I'm going to show you some of these images.
Okay, perfect.
Where they have, when I say they, I'm talking about the controllers, where they have created, in one instance, I'll show you going back to Hamburg, a hybrid Paul McCartney, where it's a little bit of biological Paul and a little bit of Billy. Going along with this, now when we have all of these, we have doubles and we have lookalikes. We have the biological versions. And we'll stick with Paul McCartney because there's also issues with John Lennon, quite honestly. But we won't get into that with this show. But I did a presentation going back about 2 years ago, and it was titled, "How Many John Lennons Are There?"
Right.
Because you start taking a look at the images, you're like, oh, okay, well, that guy doesn't look like that guy. But in any case, so what Tavistock did was to create a composite Paul McCartney. So over the years, what happens is you're going to see Paul McCartney looks this way in 1964, and then it looks a little bit like this in 65, 66, 67, right? We get to 67, that's when Billy appears. And going from 68 on and, all through the 70s, the 80s, into the 90s. When people see Paul McCartney, they look at him from an isolated perspective. In other words, they're looking at him in an interview. Right. Or they're looking at him in a magazine or article.
But not side by side, right.
Not side by side. And so you're told that this is Paul McCartney. Most people, 99.9% of the population, are going to accept it because, well, who else would it be? Mm-hmm. Because people don't think in terms of this weirdness that takes place that the controllers are engaged in. And by the way, I should mention that doubles and lookalikes are not something that's strange and odd. Many, many politicians and entertainers and important people, I think Stalin had 3 or 4 lookalikes.
Yeah, Hitler had a lot too.
Doubles,
Hitler, Yeah.
So this is not something that is just specific or pinpointed just to the McCartney conspiracy. So that's what Tavistock did. They created this composite so that it just becomes a big bowl of mush after a while. You're really not paying attention. You're just accepting that this is Paul McCartney. So anyway, the way the story goes is that he was in this car crash, and so there was this hustle to replace him. And so they brought in this replacement. He came on board, and he became the new Paul McCartney. That's a very, very simplistic version of the story because the story is a lot deeper than that. In my work, I have explained that Billy has been in the pipeline for a long time. And when I say a long time, I think he goes back to the early days of the Beatles, going back to 1962.
Wow. Okay.
It could have been even before that, working in some capacity. Mm-hmm. He was a session musician. He's also a very talented vocalist. In the book, he tells us that one of his specialties for session work was vocal mimicry. So when people say, oh, you mean they found somebody that looks exactly like him, plays like him, sings like him, writes like him? Well, first of all, none of those things are true because Billy does not look like biological Paul McCartney. Does he resemble biological Paul McCartney? Yes, and that's because of all of the cosmetics and the plastic surgery and everything else that took place to transform him. But is he a spitting image of biological Paul? No, not at all. Billy's naturally right-handed. Paul is a lefty.
And that's a big one. That's a big one, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. And there's a video that went out, I guess, on YouTube about, 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
And it compared Billy playing bass to Paul playing bass. And when Paul played bass, he didn't look down at his fingerboard too often. But Billy would look at his hand position on the fingerboard a lot. And people were saying, well, that meant that Paul McCartney was a better bass player. No, what that meant was Billy was naturally right-handed, so when he was playing left-handed, he was checking out what he was doing. I'm sure when he plays right-handed, he's not looking at his fretboard, but when he plays lefty, he's got to look.
Right.
The other thing, too, is, and I'll get into this, is, as I mentioned when we kicked off this show, Billy is blind in his right eye. He only has sight in his left eye. So when you're a lefty, the headstock is to your right, and Billy's blind in his right eye. I believe the main reason why Billy looks at the fingerboard more than Paul does when Billy's playing left-handed is because he's not a natural lefty, and because he's blind in his right eye, he's checking to make sure he's where he needs to be on that neck. Now, that doesn't mean that Billy's a lesser bass player, because when he's in the studio, he's not playing left-handed when he's recording. He plays right-handed. In fact, I guess I could tell this story. I don't think Mike will mind. Many of you may know who Mike Stock is. Mike is a prolific songwriter. He has, I think, more number one hits than Billy or, quote, Paul McCartney.
Okay.
He's out of England. Mike watched my work going back years ago, and we connected. And he was telling me that, he did some projects with, quote, Paul McCartney. I think he did maybe 2 or 3 of them, and I think they took place in the 1980s, if memory serves me correctly.
Oh, wow, cool. Okay.
So what happened was, Mike walked into the studio, and there was Billy playing guitar, right-handed. Mike paused for a moment. He says, "Wow, pretty good guitar player, playing righty when you're a lefty."
Right. That's not easy.
Right. So Billy says, he gives him this reasoning, which is kind of humorous in a way. He says, "Well, back in the day, they didn't have a lot of lefty guitars, so I had to learn to play right-handed as well." And of course, that doesn't make any sense, because if you're a lefty and you want to play guitar, you just flip the guitar around like Jimi Hendrix did and restring it. That's
Right,
all
yeah.
you need to do.
Exactly.
You don't have to teach yourself to play right-handed if you're naturally lefty.
Makes sense.
I also know another guy, and I won't say who he is, but Billy recorded on an album that he did back in the 1970s. He said to me that he was surprised at how much his bass playing was not as advanced as he would have thought it would be based upon how long that he had been playing bass. So in other words, he was surprised that his fluidness or his acumen on the bass was not better than it was. Now, not to say it was bad, but he was expecting a lot more. And at the time, he told me that he thought that it was Paul McCartney. And later on, he also watched my work and he figured out, okay, well, that wasn't Paul, that was Billy. And so he realized that the reason why the bass playing wasn't as advanced as he thought it should have been was because, well, he's not a natural lefty.
Right. And that's so important. I got to emphasize that, Mike, because I play drums, and I know you play amazing guitar. And to play your opposite hand is no easy feat. For anyone that's not a musician, I play drums. I've tried to play opposite. Like I play drums like normal, you know what I mean? Like you see I like my stick hand, I just play normal. I don't play. I'm a righty. And I try to play left-handed and it's a disaster. Like I can't do it. It's so hard. I could figure it out if I sat and worked with it constantly. I could train myself.
Yeah.
But it is a lot of work. Like it just is. It's like you said, Hendrix had it right. Why not do it that way?
Yeah. I mean, and there are Beetle tribute bands. I think the Fab Four is one of them, where the guy that plays bass is naturally righty, and he taught himself to play left-handed. So it's not that it can't be done, but it takes a lot of commitment.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because unless you're
ambidextrous
and very motivated, right? You have to be very motivated.
Yeah.
You and I'm not motivated to play lefty. I'm like,
me neither.
I'm just going to play righty. I'm a righty,
Yep.
But if somebody said to me, "Hey, Mike, you can make a ton of money if you can learn to play lefty," you might think, okay, well, how much money are we talking about?
Exactly. How many zeros are on the end of that number? Because I'll figure drums out.
Then you might give it a whirl. So anyway, getting back to Paul and Billy. So, we have situations where people have seen him, Mike has seen him play right-handed. Another situation where the other person, where Billy played on his record, where he didn't think his bass playing was as advanced as he would have thought it would have been. The other thing he told me was that he wrote out the music for the bass line because it was this guy's song. And so he put the sheet music down in front of Billy, and he said, I don't need sheet music. I'll figure this all out. And there's two things going on there. One of the reasons why he didn't take the sheet music is because what did they tell us about the Beatles? None of them could read music.
You're right. I remember that. Yep.
That's how quick Billy is on the draw. So if he's playing on somebody's album who thinks he's Paul McCartney and sheet music is placed in front of him, he's not taking the bait. And I'm not saying this guy was baiting. I'm just saying he's going to be like, okay, that could create a problem because he might say, hey, he played the bass line I wrote out for him. And somebody might say, well, that's interesting. He's not supposed to be able to read music, so how do you do that? So Billy did the bass line based upon his own musical talents. He's a multi-instrumentalist, by the way, so his ability, whether he's playing left-handed or right-handed, to figure out what to play on a song is not a problem. So anyway, so we've got... I went off on a little tangent there, but
that's awesome.
there are major differences in Paul and Billy. And the other thing is, like I said, it's the whole composite thing. And the other thing we have to remember is Billy has been playing the part of Paul McCartney. He has the primary contract. What that means is others have paged in and out over time to play the role, but Billy has the primary role. So he's Paul McCartney the vast majority of the time. This is why sometimes you'll see other images of Paul McCartney during the 70s in particular, where you're like, okay, well, who's that guy?
Mm-hmm.
So Billy has the primary role. Billy has been playing Paul McCartney longer than Paul McCartney was playing Paul McCartney.
That's crazy.
Think about that. So Billy's been in place since 1966. That's 58 years. Now, if we take 1962 as the starting point for Paul McCartney, when they wrapped up Hamburg and they released their first two singles, Love Me Do and P.S. I Love You, on the EMI label, the two singles, that's 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the public really has a view of Paul McCartney going back in time 60 years ago. It was a 4-year span of time. Whereas Billy has been playing the role for almost 60 years. So that's the guy that you're acclimated with. So when people say, well, you're going to say, they found somebody who looks exactly like him. Dude, the guy you're talking about has been playing the role for 60 years.
That's a great point to bring up.
That's the guy you have etched in your brain.
Right.
It's not biological, Paul. It's Billy. Billy's face is longer, more oval. He has a different jawline. He has a higher forehead. He's taller. And he has a prosthetic eye. And I'll take you through that with some slides I told Rick that I have to show you that he has an artificial eye. And that is the most important discovery, proving that Billy is not Paul, that I think that's ever been presented. Everything else, people want to argue about height, all that stuff, but there's no getting around the fact that Billy has an ocular prosthetic.
Right, that's huge.
It is huge.
Yeah, that's a game changer right there. So, it's really interesting. And I'm glad that you broke it down like that, Paul, that people, because you're right, there's only a 4-year period where there was the original Paul.
Right.
And then for all of that time after, that's what people are remembering back to.
Yeah.
So it's a great deception, like when you think about it, like that it really is. And I'm just fascinated.
Yeah, if you've been looking at somebody for 60 years, Rick, that's who you know.
Exactly. And I'm just glad that you broke it down like that, because I think that really makes it very clear for people listening and taking this into consideration. Like, that's the comparison that we have. We only got this 4-year period with the original Paul. Like, I'm learning so much about this, Mike, that it's so fascinating. And I'm looking forward to hour 2 for sure, because I know you want to show some pictures. I'm going to put those in the chat.
Yep.
So people, you guys can look and make up your own mind. I'm just saying that you have to be willing to look at this. And the more you dig into it, and you're going to see that there's some really weird things going on here, and it's not that far-fetched. We all know that the government lies. We know that Hollywood lies. We all know this that are listening, guys. And so to think that they wouldn't pull this off, I mean, come on. I get it. And as Mike said, and I said, you're attacking something near and dear to your heart. I get it. I was there at one time, but I'm still willing to look. So I am going to go ahead. I know that the break should be starting now, guys. If I'm couple seconds early, I do apologize, but please, we'll be back in like 3 or 4 minutes. Stick around. Hour 2, we got Mike Williams here. Paul is Dead channel, YouTube. I did put it in the chat. Check it out, guys, when you get a moment. We'll be back in like 4 or 5 minutes, guys. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully this is all working. Can you hear me, Mike?
I can hear you, Rick.
Okay, perfect. My mic was starting and not Skype was acting up again. I'm like, oh no. But we're good. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the first hour. We're diving into the Beatles. This is episode 3 of 3. I was saying at the beginning, please, guys, if you have not seen or listened to, episode 1 and 2, please go back to the archive section because it is crucial. We are building upon a foundation of the last 2 shows that we've done. So you have to go back a couple months, listen to the first one, then the second one, and then this one. If you need dates, I can probably get you the dates for that and let you guys know that the dates that me and Mike did the first 2 shows and then come back and listen to this one is just so important. And I just want to put that out there because we've really come a long way to get to where we are. Now I have Mike back. This is, like I said, last one, 3 of 3. And we're getting into Paul and his death. Did they fake his death? Is it the real Paul McCartney? And Mike's doing a great job. And we're going to be looking at an image of different over the years of Paul and how he's changed. So take it over, Mike, where you wanted to take off from here.
Okay, so the first thing I want to say, Rick, is that there's a couple of schools of thought here. One is that Paul died. Another one is that Paul didn't die; that he was just simply replaced and retired. And of course, some people believe that Paul's always been Paul, but he's not. Billy is not Paul, and Paul is not Billy. So what I tell people is, look, I don't get overly concerned about or caught up in whether he actually died or not, or he was just replaced and swapped out. It's an interesting discussion to have. We'll never really know for sure, although I definitely lean toward him not being here anymore, meaning that he's deceased. But is it possible that he could have just been replaced and gone off to, I don't know, like a witness protection program or something like that? I don't know. The more important thing is that, again, is what I said earlier. It's about what the Beatles were all about as far as a social and cultural engineering initiative. So whether Paul McCartney was in the band or not, whether he died or not, whether he was replaced or not, in my view, at the end of the day, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference because the Beatles, as a social engineering entity created by Tavistock, was going to do what it was designed to do, and that is to social engineer the masses. So regardless, if Paul was still there, the Beatles still would have been in that social engineering mode. Now, Billy put it into high gear because he was a very high level within the elite establishment, as well as being an accomplished occultist. And Billy, in essence, took over the band. He was the band's handler come late 1966. In a way, he kind of replaced George Martin. George Martin was still there, but Billy was much more prominent as far as shaping the music, moving the band in a certain direction, and so on. You're going to hear different dates, too. Some people will say, oh, he died in August of 66. Some people will say, and I go with this date because of the occult significance, he died September 11th of 1966. Others will say it was November 9th of 1966. And that's because when you look at the drum head on Sgt. Pepper and you move the mirror up halfway up the drum head, the British will say it's the British format, which would say November 9th. But in the book, Billy unequivocally tells us that no, the date was September 11th of 1966. And September 11th is a very important date.
Absolutely.
In the occult, okay?
Yep.
So you have August, you have September, and you have November. I tell people it doesn't matter to me. It really doesn't. Because if he died, dead is dead. Whether he died in August, September, or November, you're not here anymore. And if he was just replaced, then he was replaced. But like I said, we have to transcend all that. We have to understand what the Beatles were created to do. So with or without Paul McCartney, I think that Tavistock and the Deep State were going to pull out as many rabbits out of the hat that they possibly could to make sure that they accomplished what they were looking to accomplish with the Beatles and the music industry in general. Okay, so anyway, so going back to 2009, this is an article that came out in Wired magazine in Italy back in 2009. You see July 7th of 2010 here, but that's when this particular post was dated. So back in 2009, there were 2 Italians. The title of the article is Ask Who Was That Beetle? So we'll just say Who Was That Beetle?
Okay.
So the cover story for the July 15, 2009 issue of Wired Italia the Italian edition of the U.S. magazine Wire, describes the analysis of the McCartney conspiracy theory conducted by two Italians, Gabriella Carlisi and Francesco Gavazzini, the man and the woman that we see in the photo above. The purpose for analyzing this conspiracy theory was to provide indisputable scientific evidence that would put an end to the persistent rumors that Paul McCartney had died in a car accident in 1966. Now, this is very interesting, right? Because they're saying to provide indisputable scientific evidence that would put an end to the persistent rumors. And it has been very persistent. However, the results of their analysis surprised them. Instead of putting an end to the rumors, their analysis provides scientific evidence that the Paul McCartney of today is not the same man as the Paul McCartney prior to 1966. And I'll send you a link to this, Rick, so you could put it into your description box.
Perfect. That would be great. Thank
Everybody
you.
can, because I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's 8 pages. By coincidence, on that same day that this article appeared in Italy, Paul McCartney was at the Ed Sullivan Theater in New York City to appear on the David Letterman television show and to give a free outdoor performance on top of the marquee of the Ed Sullivan Theater. He and Letterman laughed about the silly rumor that Paul McCartney had died in 1966. This is a very famous interview where Billy masterfully speaks, and I'll send that link as well.
Okay.
Okay, so what Billy was doing here, so this article came out in Wired magazine, and so in order to preempt it, he went on the Letterman show, in essence, to trump this analysis, to get out ahead of it. We could interpret McCartney's appearance in New York City as an attempt to distract Americans from the publication of the Italian article and to encourage Americans to laugh at the McCartney conspiracy theories. So this person says, I will use the name Paul to refer to Paul McCartney before the 1966 car accident and Paul to refer to the Paul McCartney after the accident. So who are Gabriella Carlisi and Francesco Gavazzini? So Gabriella is a forensic pathologist who specializes in identification of people through craniometry. That's the comparison of certain features of the skull and the analysis of the teeth. While Francesco Gavazzini is a specialist in computer analysis. By putting their talents together, they were able to use a computer to obtain high-precision measurements of Paul McCartney's skull from various photos of his face. Certain features of the skull, teeth, and ears are extremely effective for identifying us. Some of them cannot currently be modified by surgery. In fact, in Germany, the identification of the shape of the right ear has the same legal value of that of a DNA test or fingerprint detection.
Wow.
Gabriella has been a consultant for identification of people via digital image processing for various investigations, including, and so they go through some very high-level work that she's done.
Okay, this is interesting.
So the two researchers began their analysis by obtaining high-quality photos of Paul McCartney before and after the car accident. Gavazzini complained that some photos taken before 1966 were not properly dated. Sometimes different photo agencies would have different dates for the same photo, and that some of the best photos were the property of photographers who were very reluctant to release them. However, they eventually found 2 good quality photos dated before 1966 and 2 after 1967. Different photos of a human face, in order to be compared, have to be resized to match the same scale. To do this, one feature of the face must be used as a scaling factor. These two researchers opted for the distance between the pupils. In other words, the photos were scaled so that the distance between the pupils were exactly the same for all of them. So here they have some photos, and they're showing you what they did. And let me just hop down to the punchline here. Like I said, I don't want to read the whole thing. They looked at the teeth and the palate of the mouth.
Jeez, yeah.
I'll talk about the DNA test in a moment. Just remind me about that.
Okay.
Both of the Italian researchers were shocked to discover that the conspiracy theories appear valid. So at the end of the article, they do some damage control by pointing out that since McCartney is a famous person, more analyses should be conducted before anybody makes these accusations so that we can be 100% certain about the conclusion. Earlier in that article, Gavazzini admitted that the more they were pressured to release the results of their analysis, the more they tried to stall for time because the evidence was pointing in the opposite direction of what they were hoping for. So they were hoping to prove that Paul was always Paul.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So now they're sweating bullets. Like, okay, this is not what we're finding here.
Right.
unfortunately for them, the more time they spent analyzing the evidence, the more certain they became that Paul McCartney really did die in 1966, or that he was replaced in 1966. Okay, so again, I will leave a link to this article.
That'll be perfect.
Rick, okay?
Yep, perfect.
So the reason why I'm pointing this out, folks, is because this is not just something that Mike concocted or other Paul is Dead researchers have concocted. I mean, this is something that goes back to 2009. Now, it's interesting to note that the Memoirs of Billy Shears was released on September 9th of 2009. So 2 months really after this article was published, the book comes out where Billy's telling us, through Tom Harriet, that this was all true. Some people will say, what about a DNA test? Well, there was a DNA test. So going back into the early 1960s, Paul McCartney had an affair with a lady by the name of Erika Hubers. She was German. And Erika became pregnant with Paul's child. They had a daughter, and the daughter's name is Bettina. So Paul was required by the German courts, I'm talking about biological Paul McCartney, to pay child support. And so when Paul was no longer with us, when he departed, Billy picked up the child support payments. And the reason why Billy picked up the payments was because child support is a contractual obligation.
Right, yeah.
Right? So Billy can't turn around if he's playing Paul McCartney and say, I don't want to pay the child support because I'm not the child's father.
Exactly.
Well, aren't you Paul McCartney? Oh, yeah, good point. Okay, I'll pay the child support payments, right? So he was really caught between a rock and a hard place. So he had to pay the child support. So what happened was, at age 18, Billy stopped the payments. And I think he stopped the payments because legally that was it. But the Hubers made a case, they brought it to court, that it should go past age of 18, considering how famous he is and how much money he's got, and that this is his child. He should make payments beyond 18 years of age. So the mother, Erika Hubers, took Paul McCartney, or Billy, to court. So 2 things happened during that court case. One was that they did an analysis of his handwriting, and Erika Hubers said, that's not Paul's signature. And the court took the signature that they had, that was Billy's signature, and they compared it to some signatures they had in a museum in Germany. And it was quite perplexing because they didn't match. They weren't the same signature. The court ordered Billy to give a blood sample for DNA testing. And so Billy did that. And of course, since Billy is not really Paul McCartney, when the DNA testing came back, what happened? Well, the blood didn't match, so therefore Billy was able to claim that he's not the father of Bettina Hubers. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So even though Paul was indeed the father, there was no quibbling about that, because Paul had a child with Erika, and he was paying child support. Billy picked it up. Now, because the DNA testing through the blood test didn't match, now Billy can step back and say, well, I'm not going to pay anything because she wasn't my child to begin with.
This is crazy.
So now, for those that are wondering if this is a made-up story, there's no need to wonder. Go and do a search. Look up Paul McCartney and Erika Hubers, Hubers, or Bettina Hubers, Bettina Hubers.
Okay.
And there's the story. It's out there, okay? It's not something that is conspiratorial or secret or something that anybody made up. That story's out there. So here we have a situation where we do indeed have proof that Billy is not Paul. Paul was the father of Bettina. Now he's not the father of Bettina.
Right.
There was another situation. Billy was arrested for putting a bunch of weed into his suitcase when Wings was going off to go do a concert in Japan. And so when he gets to Japan, he gets to customs, they open up his suitcase and they find a big bag of weed. And so this caused a big problem for him, because the Japanese culture, it's just not something that you do.
Exactly. You're correct. Yep.
So they put Billy in the clink, and he winds up in a Japanese jail for 9 days. So what happened was they took his fingerprints. when they arrested him. So while he's in jail, the Japanese police are interrogating him, and they're saying to him, "Who are you?" And he's like, "What do you mean, who am I? I'm Paul McCartney." He said, "You're not Paul McCartney. Who are you? You're an imposter." So he's in jail. He's trying to figure out, how in God's name do they know that I'm not Paul McCartney? How do they know? Well, because Interpol had fingerprints of biological Paul going back to Hamburg. So back in Hamburg, the way the story goes, he and Pete Best, Paul McCartney and Pete Best, nailed a condom to the wall of one of the nightclubs. They lit it on fire. Okay?
Yeah.
And so what happened was, to make a long story short, the police were called, and the German police arrested biological Paul and Pete, and they were kids.
Mm-hmm.
But they took their fingerprints, and then they booted them out of the country. They told them, "Get out. Go back home."
Right.
So Interpol had biological Paul McCartney's fingerprints on file. Now, Billy gets arrested in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and they take his fingerprints, and they have different fingerprints. Okay, so that's another story. So when people are thinking that there's not really substantive proof or evidence out there, we have these types of situations that a lot of people, in all likelihood, don't know anything about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know about I didn't know about the DNA or the fingerprints. Like that's pretty powerful evidence.
Yeah. So the 9 days in Japan, the fingerprints don't match, and then we have the Erica Bettina Huber situation where, he was the father of the child, and then magically he's not. These are all situations that, if somebody is critically thinking, will be able to connect the dots.
Yeah, like this is really interesting. And as I was saying, like the more you dig into this, you really start to uncover things.
Okay, so I put this together years ago when I first got into this thing. And so on the left, number 1, we have biological Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So if we make our way across, look at number 2. That's a double, a look-alike. Number 3 is Billy during the Sgt. Pepper era. And then we have number 4, which is possibly Billy as well. Look at number 5. One of the things we notice with Billy is his chin is elongated. Number 6, I don't know who that is, but that looks like possibly another double or look-alike. Number 7 could possibly be Billy, but his face seems a little rounder to me here. And this is definitely Billy here, number 8. This is during his Wings period when he had his mullet. Now, the point here is that, remember I said before about this whole process of having a composite Paul McCartney?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about, Rick.
Okay.
So here, again, we have picture number 1, which is Paul, but look at picture number 2. This is one of these hybrid 50-50 deals where they blended Paul with Billy. And you can almost see it's like a pretty boy face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's not this guy's face.
No, they're drastically
different.
Yeah.
Look at number 3, another look-alike. 4 is Billy. We got the elongated chin. We've got the bit of the hooked nose, the high forehead. 5 is Billy during the 1980s. Now take a look at number 5, Rick. The guy in number 5, does he look anything like the guy in number 1, biological?
No, nothing.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Nope.
6 is another look-alike. 7 is the same guy in 5. And again, that's not the same guy as number 1, who was the real Paul McCartney. And then we have number 8, that's Billy. You can tell, take a look at his nose. See how his nose is narrower?
Mm-hmm.
Has a slight hook to it. It's the same thing we have in picture number 4. It's the same thing we have in picture number 7. Now, Billy's had surgery on his nose. That's why we're going to see his nose changes over time as well. So I did this image going back a number of years ago. It's not the same guy. I mean, here we have a picture of Paul, circa 1964, 65. And then you've got this image of Billy from his Wings period with his mullet. That is not the same person. It's baffling to me that anybody who looks at these two images could think that they're the same person. Let's put it this way. I wouldn't want that person being a witness to a crime.
That's so true, because they're very drastic.
All right, so
wow.
So let me just move to the eye real quick.
And can this presentation be found on your YouTube channel?
I'll put a link to a presentation that has this in it.
Okay, that would be perfect, because I'll put that in the chat as well. the live chat, because I did put a link to your YouTube channel, though, Mike Williams, Paul is Dead channel. Please check it out, guys, because all this information is here, and you're going to see the pictures, how drastically different they are, what Mike is explaining.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Billy, who Billy is, okay? So Billy in the book tells us that he says he played the character of Vivian Stanshall in a band that was called the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes. Neil Innes, many people will know Neil. He's passed away now. He's a brilliant songwriter and musician. He was the brainchild behind the Ruddles, which was a parody band of the Beatles. Going back to 1976, I think it was. The title of the movie was All You Need Is Cash. And the Ruddles, they released, I think, 2 albums. Very, very Beatlish music. It's a parody, but it's really, really well done. So what does Billy really look like? First of all, I had to figure out, well, did he really play the character of Vivian Stanshall? So this is Stanshall here at the top, and this is Billy. And what he did was, Billy hired another person to play the Stanshall character along with himself. So he played Vivian Stanshall in the Bonzo Dog Band with Neil Innes.
Okay, yeah.
But there was another version of Stanshall. His first name is Victor. I don't know what his last name is. Billy hired him so that his McCartney character and his Stanshall character could coexist. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you have the Batman and Bruce Wayne thing. You never see them in the same room together, right?
Yep.
So Billy wanted to make sure that if they were in the same room, Stanshall was there and Paul McCartney, Billy playing Paul McCartney, could be there. So on this slide, what I'm showing you is the different faces of Stanshall. This is Billy. To the right, that's what I refer to as Street Viv or Victor. This was the other Vivian Stanshall that Billy had on his payroll. Then down below were some doubles and lookalikes. These doubles and lookalikes are everywhere, folks. Everywhere.
Wow, look at this. The many faces of Vivian. Oh, my God. Thank you so much. This is on the spot, guys. So thank Mike for doing this, because we didn't, this wasn't anything we had planned. So he's just doing this on the fly.
So what we have is we have this Stanshall character. Number 1 is an very early image or picture of Billy without the mustache. So it's hard to find it without the mustache. And then to the right is the same guy with the handlebar mustache. And then to the right again is him. You can see his face is filling out a little more, because he's also, aside from doing Stanshall, he's playing the McCartney character. And of course he's got these glasses on, and this helps to distract from trying to make the comparisons, if you will. Look at the eyes.
Yep.
Look at the flare of the nose between pictures 2 and 3. And then you've got other images that don't look like him at all. Let's take a look at picture number 7. Look at the nose here. It's kind of this shorter, stubbier nose. The same thing here in number 8. Number 9 is the picture of Stanshall that you'll see in Wikipedia, because they tell us that Stanshall died in 1995. Well, the version of Stanshall that's in Wikipedia that passed away in 1995 was Victor. See, Stanshall is a fictitious character. He's not real. Billy invented him. But Victor took on the persona of Stanshall. And so when you look at Wikipedia and you see the death of Vivian Stanshall, that's who they're showing you. They're showing you Victor. They're not showing you Billy, because obviously he's still alive.
Exactly.
So here's the 2 different versions of Stanshall, right? We can see they're 2 different people. But both of these people are called Vivian Stanshall.
That's amazing. Wow. You really get it's great that you have the side-by-sides.
Yeah.
This, it just adds so much. It's so hard to explain it.
And I'm going to try to go through this quickly, because I want to get to Billy and his eye, and you'll see more of Stanshall.
Okay.
So here's an image that I found. This is Billy as McCartney and Stanshall. This is the same person. So Billy tells us what he does is when he plays his Stanshall character, he forces his eyebrows down. When he plays his McCartney character, he raises his eyebrows. And he says he does this because it alters the appearance of the face.
Right.
Look at the teeth. The teeth are the same. Look at the shape of the mouth. Look at the eyes.
Yeah, that is really telling.
This is Billy playing McCartney, and this is Billy playing Stanshall. Take a look at this. So it's the same image from before. This is the same guy. Notice the hair and, again, the eye shape. It's the same guy. Here's the 2 different Stanshalls again. Here's Billy on the left, and here's Victor on the right. Well, first of all, Billy's got this blondish, reddish hair. Victor is almost a redhead. And look at how lanky.
Yeah, that's really different.
Victor's very skinny. He's 6'3", very thin. Billy's probably around the 6 foot range. Victor is taller.
And way lankier. Wow.
So here we go. Here we got Billy from the Sgt. Pepper era. And here is his image playing the Stanchel character with the funny glasses. Look what happens when we superimpose the pictures upon each other.
That is really crazy.
So we could see, I mean, I was telling you before, he's got a wig on. So we could see the wig on his head here on the image all the way on the right. Take a look at this one. So here's an older Billy and going across, playing his Stanchel character, an older Stanchel.
Jeez. Yeah, like some of these are just incredible, guys. Like, wow, I gotta definitely put that in the chat for people to see. Just when you superimpose over it and start layering it, wow.
So here we have, here's an image of Stanchel. He has that beaked nose, the curved nose. And then look at Billy's nose. Now, Billy's had surgery to pull the nostrils in a little bit, but he still has that curvature. Here, we'll see it better on this slide here.
Right.
Here's a slide, his facial profile. So we can see that we have the same slope of the forehead.
Okay, yeah.
The same indentation above the nose. Look at the chin. Look at the jawline. Now, we have to understand that Billy's gone under the knife. Plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery. But as he gets older, what's happening is we're seeing the plastic surgery not holding together as well. Here we have an older McCartney and Stanchel. Look at the eyes. It's wild, right?
It really is. Like, I'm actually speechless looking at this. I'm just like, this is amazing.
So I'm going to get to something here that's going to blow your mind. So here is Paul McCartney's son, James, or Billy's son, James. Pictures number 2 and 4. Remember the picture I showed you of Billy playing Stanchel, and I said it's difficult to come by one with no mustache? Yes. Look at the resemblance between him and his son.
Wow. Oh, my God. I'm sure people are wondering, like, why would somebody get the surgery and all of that? I can give you a few million reasons why that you would do all of this.
It's a deep state operation.
Yep.
I cannot emphasize this enough. People have to stop looking at the Beatles as 4 lovable lads from Liverpool. They were a deep state social engineering initiative.
There was a lot going on. Yeah, there was a lot going on in with music in the 60s and stuff like that. It's fascinating. That's what really got me starting to look.
So, and then here we have Billy and James McCartney. Billy and Linda had a child. The child came out looking like James with his reddish blonde hair, very Scottish looking, looking a lot like his dad. Look at the eyes.
Yeah, the eyes are the giveaway. Wow.
All right, so let me go back up here. So I told you that Billy has an ocular
correct
prosthesis. He has an artificial eye. Here's what an artificial eye looks like. It's actually medical grade plastic acrylic. It's not really glass. It's an acrylic. And so going back to 2019, I had noticed that there was this wandering eye thing between Billy and Stanchel, because I was taking a look at whether he played the character of Vivian Stanchel in the Bonzos. So I found this image of Billy, an older Billy, playing the McCartney role, and then we have this image on the right.
Yeah, like this is the amount of research that you've done into this, and this is 8 years that you've done. This is a lot of work to get all of this compiled into one spot is what makes it amazing.
Well, I had to compile it because after a while it just became it was too much.
Right, yeah.
So what we notice here, Rick, is look at the left eye, which is on our right. Notice on the McCartney character how the eye wanders a little to the left or to our right.
Okay.
And we've got the same thing going with the Stanchel character, right?
Okay, I see. You're right. The right eye, okay.
Now look at the right eye, which is on our left, and look at how that eye is looking straight ahead. So it appears that the left eye is drifting or it's wandering, right? Would you agree?
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and to point it out, I did this slide here just so people can focus on it and notice that the eyes are the same. In other words, there's the same anomaly but they're supposed to be two different people. So what are the odds that two different people have the same eye anomaly between them? So what I did then was I fenced off the face. So anyway, with this one here, what I did was, let's take the McCartney character, the older McCartney, and let's take a look at his left eye, right?
Mm-hmm.
His right eye, which is on our
Our
left.
left, yep.
That's his blind eye. He's blind in his right eye. So that's what we're seeing here is an ocular prosthetic.
Okay.
And then if we shift over, we can see his left eye is looking a bit left or wandering a little left.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I take the Stanshall character and I do the same thing, I fence off half the face and we take a look at the right eye, which is on our left. We can see that the eye is looking directly at us. The same thing that the first picture is doing. And again, this is his fake eye, his artificial eye, his right eye. Blind in his right eye. And then his left eye, which is on our right, the picture all the way to the right, the fourth picture, we can see that the eye again is wandering to the left. Again, if they're supposed to be two different people, how is it that the same eye situation is occurring with two different people?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay?
And again, gives like any, as you were saying too, just quickly, is that, you know, he played when he was playing right-handed. That's a big thing too. If you're blind in your right eye, all of this is starting to add up. Like that's a big point too.
He doesn't have sight in his right eye, and also Billy acknowledged that to us. Okay, and if I have time, in fact, I will play that clip.
Okay.
So here is another picture where we could see where he's in concert, and I've noticed that you can actually see the anomaly with the eye, his left eye, where it doesn't track with his artificial right eye. A lot of times it happens when he looks hard left. When he looks hard left, his left eye is his good eye. His right eye doesn't always follow. The other thing I want to mention too is a lot of people are under the false impression that artificial eyes, ocular prosthetics, don't move. Wrong. In most cases, in many cases, when somebody has an artificial eye, they have good movement because it's based upon the muscle behind the eye.
Right, that makes sense.
So unless there is severe damage to the eye, where the eye basically would be static, that's a different story. But Billy doesn't have that case. So he has good movement between his eyes. Obviously he does because somebody would have picked it up a long time ago.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Sally picked it up because Sally is also blind in one eye. She's blind in her left eye.
Okay.
So she started watching videos and taking a look at images and noticed and said, you know, his eyes are doing what my eyes do. So we can see in this image here where you can see how his left eye, the eye on our right, is looking hard left.
Mm-hmm.
And look at his right eye, his artificial eye. It's looking straight ahead.
Yep. Yep.
See, it's not tracking.
Exactly. No, it's, yeah.
The same situation here.
Jeez, wow. Like,
same thing here,
it's the
right?
same thing. Yep.
Here we have an image of him playing the McCartney character on the left with the black hair, right? And he's wearing a hairpiece, and he has it blended above his ears. We could see it right here. I could see it.
Okay, I see.
Right?
Yep.
Stanshall had a receding hairline, so I think what Billy has done is I think he wears hair weaves. I actually did research into this. I was looking at how hair weaves are done,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm convinced that that's how he gets that full head of hair. It's a hair weave and or the use of wigs. So let's take a look at this image, okay? We can see that we have the exact same jawline. Look at the mustache. He didn't even bother to change up the mustache.
Yeah.
It's the same mustache. The nose is very, very similar. He's had a little bit of work here where he's skinnied up on the left as McCartney. He's skinnied up where the nostrils are versus the Stanshall character. Now, some people, I had this one person always on me about the eyes. Oh, they can't alter eyes. They can't alter eyes. I'm like, wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to do some research. There's a surgical procedure called a blepharoplasty or a bleph. And it's a procedure that surgically removes excess fat, muscle, and skin from the upper and lower eyelids to redefine the shape of the eye. And that's what's going on here. So Billy had a bleph done, probably more than one, to reshape the eye. But we still can't get around the fact that he's got that ocular prosthetic in his right eye. And even in this picture on the left as McCartney, we can see he's looking forward. And then he has that laziness, wandering left eye here as well.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so in the narrative above the image, I said, notice the overall facial structure, the jawline, the mouth, the mustache, and the ear. I can even see that the ear is the same. It's a little difficult to see, but take a look at the rim of the ear right here. He has the same folds, the same, I guess, cartilage or ligament in the ear structure in both images.
Right.
And I mentioned his right eye's blind eye looks straight ahead as his left eye appears lazy and drifts to the left. And surgery altered the nose. It's narrower on the left, but you can still see it's still the same basic structure of the nose. And the eyelids and the eyes were redefined.
Yeah, very interesting.
Through a bleph, okay? Now, the other thing, too, is what Sally said is what people who have artificial eyes, the eye that is artificial, the lid protrudes out more than the other eye, the good eye. That's because the eyelid is going over the acrylic ocular prosthetic. And we can see that with Billy. Can you see that?
Yes, I sure can.
You can see where it protrudes?
Yep.
Where he doesn't have that on his left eye. So let me get something real quick here because I know we're running out of time. So let me just get this real quick. Hold on one second.
No, this is perfect. It just really you can keep doing show. I can see why you have 8 years into this, because even in 3 shows, it just keeps going.
Oh my God, Rick! I mean, I could talk about this for days. My biggest fear is somebody will ask me to go to some kind of like Paul is Dead convention,
right,
or something, and want to present. I'd be like, where do you want me to start?
Exactly, and then like how much time do you have? Because we put 6 hours into this, just building up to this point.
All right, so let me just see if I can share this real quick.
Yeah, the images are really, I'm glad that we were got that out to the people watching in the chat, or listening in the chat, because that's really helped. And I'm going to put a link again to your YouTube channel while you're looking, just because, please guys, go give it a look. All of what we're talking about is right on this page.
So after we came out with his ocular prosthetic, now we spoke to Tom about this, or Sally did, and Tom said, be diplomatic about this. In other words, which of course we're very professional, so we would never ever poke fun or anything like that, all right? So just real quick, what happens is Billy's at this exhibit. It's the Eye of the Storm exhibit where allegedly Paul McCartney took all these pictures back in 1964. The person who's interviewing him, they're going through the gallery, and he says to Billy, that's quite a picture you've got there. And he says, it really takes an eye to take that type of picture. And Billy goes, my left one.
This picture was when we were arriving at, I think it was the Deauville Hotel in Miami.
I think your quote in the book was, I can almost hear her scream.
Yeah, you can. The cop's got to restrain her,
Well, I also love the cop in the foreground who just sort of looks puzzled by everything.
I know. Yeah. I like the architecture.
So do I.
That
I actually
hotel.
love it.
But, as we were saying before, that had to be taken really quickly.
Yeah.
Just had to snap that.
Yeah. But you have to have an eye to take that.
It's my left one.
But you have to have an eye to take that. It's my left one.
Okay.
So Billy was confirming to us that he only has sight in his left eye. And in fact, the discovery of his eye, being blind in his right eye, has made it into the footnotes of the Memoirs of Billy Shears, acknowledging Sally's work.
So that's a book that people have to get, if they haven't already read it, is the Memoirs of Billy Shears.
All right, Rick, I hope that was helpful.
Oh, my God, it was amazing. I want to thank you so much, Mike. And I know you're under the weather today, because as we said earlier, so I thank you even double for being here. And this is, like I said, guys, the third. We did 3 of 3, and we could have done 5 of 5, I'm sure. Like Mike said, this could go on for episode after episode. But please, I put a link to his YouTube channel. Go check it out. Subscribe if you're interested in anything that we're saying. It's all there. I'll make sure I put links when I upload it to the presentation and that. And I want to thank you, Mike. It's amazing, the information that you've accumulated over 8 years, and you've put out for people to take in and do their own research. It's all there.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I appreciate the kind words. I really do. Like I said, you reach the end of the road on things, and 8 years is a long time, so I don't have any regrets. And for anybody who's interested, like I said, my YouTube channel will be up, and it'll be a repository for the body of work, and Have fun.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. And like I said, links are up, guys. I'm going to upload this so you guys can check it out, the video format of it. And yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, Mike. And I'm going to keep my ear watching your content and learning more, because you've really you've made me appreciate the Beatles more by looking into it. And so I was at one point, as I said, the very episode probably one, I'm not a Beatles fan. I wasn't, and it's growing on me. But what also is happening at the same time is that when you start researching, you realize, like you said, how dark it goes and deep it gets. So
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much.
I thank you so much. I will definitely keep in touch if I have any questions that I need help with, or some guidance where to look next, because this is really fascinating to me. And thank you for being able to provide the slides on the quick notice like that. It really helped the chat to follow along. So that was awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Have a great week. I promise I will keep in touch, my friend. Maybe we can talk music sometime, and just talk music. And doesn't have to be the Beatles. We could just talk music and drumming and guitaring and all of that, because I would love to do that too.
I love talking about that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
All
Rick.
right. Take care, my friend.
I was so glad to see that this was how we worked. And you know, you think about it, we really bit off an impossible thing. We're supposed to like write and learn and perform new songs all in the period of like about a month or something. So it was like, strictly speaking, a little bit impossible.